What's up, gang? It's Deluxe, and I'm back with another video. Today, I'm going to be going over exactly how I made $130 trading the NASDAQ. And this should have been a way bigger win, and I'll explain to you guys what happened exactly. But essentially, this was the trade that I took right here. It was a 3-minute inverse, and I had to include the inception gap in my stop loss, which kind of made it not the greatest RR, but it is what it is. So I did actually record the live executions I had of this trade. So I'm going to be playing that and kind of just going over my thought process as I'm in this trade and as I'm doing it. So you can see here, I have my trading view split into two screens, and that's because the stop loss was too big for me to enter using a mini. So I had to pull up the micro contract for NQ, which I didn't actually have the most recent one of. I should have been on MNQZ and not MNQU. So that's what I was doing right here. I was pulling up the most recent contract right here. And that made me a little delayed on my entry. You can see the candles closing in 2 seconds, so I should be entering right now. Except I was still trying to figure out the stop loss and the amount of contracts I could enter with. So that delayed me by like 15 seconds, which made my entry higher up. And you'll see here how that happens, and you'll also see why that's so important later in the video. So look, I'm managing my risk right here. I'm risking 500 because I'm on an eval. I saw it was 8 contracts from down here, so I figured we're a little higher up than that. So I go to enter with 5 contracts, and at first I didn't actually recognize that I needed to include the inception gap in my stop loss because we didn't quite form it yet on the 3-minute. So I was originally kind of sizing for that, although I did end up sizing lighter just because I kind of guessed how many contracts to enter with. But typically I don't like having to redraw everything on micros. I just like to be able to draw everything on minis and enter over here. But the stop loss was just way too big for that, and I had to quickly like draw everything out on micros so that I could actually manage my risk properly. So this is just me drawing everything out, getting my levels on the micro, which you'll also notice the wick that I was targeting, the data high from 830, is bigger on micro than it is on mini. I'm kind of like flipping around here, but essentially micros are not accurate 100% of the time to the mini, which is also why I don't really like trading it, because you could get a massive wick on micro that just doesn't appear on the mini, and it kind of sucks. But I'm just going here through the trade, waiting for it to hit this break-even point, which wasn't a bad target. It was a high inside of a gap over here on this leg down. But essentially, I'm just chilling here, and I'll skip forward a little bit. But basically, the idea for this trade, so we had a 15-minute BPR we were delivering from, which is a good, holding, or a good support level in price, you could say. Price tends to reject out of that. And then we also had an SMT with ES on both London low and Asia low. So if we look at ES, you can see London low and Asia low, we swept on this down move here. So if I go back, we didn't sweep them on NQ, but that's enough to say, okay, we don't really need to come and sweep these on the NASDAQ, right? And then we were also delivering from this 1-hour gap, and the bias is pretty bullish because we're literally at all-time highs. So I expect this 1-hour gap to hold, and I expect the 15-minute to hold, which means at this time, I expect this signature in price where, we sweep these levels down here, like this low from pre-market, the 930 wick. I expect us to go down and hold these high time frame PD arrays and go back up to take out this drawn liquidity being the data high from 830. So now that we know that, let's go back to the video. And you can see I end up in a lot of drawdown. And I was thinking at the time, I was like, geez, like, are we just going to continue lower even though like we swept them on ES? And this is me checking the 5-minute time frame, which I realized we had not closed above yet. So that made me kind of doubt everything in this trade, because typically I do want to wait for all time frame inversions unless I'm super confident on like the momentum, which the momentum was really good, I will say. Like, we did just jet up, and that's where I took my entry. But from a probability side of things, waiting for the 5 minute to close probably would have been the best idea. So let's keep watching here. End up in a lot of drawdown, and typically you should close the position if we do close below the fair value gap that we inverted. But because we had that 3 minute inception gap right here, see that? That's kind of our last line of defense. So that should be included in my stop loss. Now, that would have been a hefty loss for me because I did size for the gap right here. But I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to stick to my rules. If I do take a large loss, like, it'll suck. But I'd rather take the large loss and have my trade idea invalidated rather than close it because I managed my risk improperly, if that makes sense. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hold it. We'll see what happens. I am pretty confident we will go back up. And then, oh, I skipped past it. Look at that, like, crazy momentum. I'm just chilling here. I'm like, damn, like, I'm in drawdown, bro. I should probably, like, I should see what I should have entered with. And it was only 4 contracts. And then, bam, we just have that crazy candle right there. I think I, like, barely saw it, but it's just like, boom, like, a bunch of points in a second. I was like, okay, that's like a really good sign. So we get that. Then we kind of, I'll skip forward a little bit. We start going back up to my entry, and I'm like, let's go. I should like probably set my take profit because I was just so distracted by like everything else regarding the trade. So we have that. Skip forward a bit. So we're going to my break even point here in profit. And after this high gets swept is when I'm going to drag my stop to break even, which it gets swept. So I drag it. Boom, on break even. You can see 5 contracts, right? So if price comes back down to that, it should buy back 5 contracts because that's how it works, right? So you'll see something weird does happen. And price comes back down. Skip forward a little bit here. It takes a second to come back down to my entry. It should be right here. So remember, I had 5 contracts in my stop loss for break even, and I'm entered with 5 contracts, obviously. So if it gets hit, I should be closed out of the position, right? No, for some reason it sold 4. It sold 4 contracts. I don't know why I was saying buyback earlier. It's a long position, but it sold 4 contracts for some reason. So I was like, what? I'll turn on the audio for it.
The fuck?
So I was like, what? So I let it play out because I really shouldn't have got break even, because if you look here, my entry should have been at this close of the candle here. And, you know, I entered late, so it was higher up. But also, I did have my break even point above my entry, which I do typically do by like 1 tick. I think I was slightly higher than I should have been. But even though, I mean, it's like a super low chance that, you know, it does this, where it barely hits my break even and not my actual entry. So that does suck. I should have been more precise with it, but it was super strange. Like, it just only took out 4 of my 5 contracts, even though it was set for 5. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to hold the trade, I guess, and see what happens. I do end up changing this to 1 in a second because I only have 1 contract in the trade, so I don't want to sell 5 when I'm only in with 1. So we get that. And now price just goes up pretty slowly, but we just slowly grind up to the data high.
Oh, it's kind of high. Bang!
So yeah,
Who took that?
that was my take profit hit. You can see this was the amount I made. It should have been realistically 5 times that. So 130 times 5 should have been $650, but you know, poor trade management from me, honestly. Should have been ready with the micros. Should have had my stop loss properly calculated, but I didn't. And I got kind of lucky with the fact that, you know, I didn't get fully break even. I still made $100 because it kept one contract in, but very, very weird. That's going to be it for this trade recap. I hope you guys learned something from, my analysis going into the trade, and you learned what not to do when you're actually entering a trade. And I do have the full trade recap kind of condensed into like a minute video on my Instagram and my TikTok. So make sure you guys go follow those. I'll link them in the description, and I'll see y'all later.